have family connections. All of their offices, their high offices that they achieve, are through connections.
So they were like, no more family ties, just like our identity should.
Pardon?
Like, no more family, they cut off family ties and just like.
Right, so that's the big shift. Right, so John Quincy Adams, who is the son of the second president, John Adams, he is what we call the last of the notables. And we then see a big shift. And, you know, in his farewell address, Washington and a lot of other founding fathers, they warn of these political parties because they can lead to warring factions. But American people prefer political parties because they see an identity. They identify with political parties. And in fact, one person in particular uses a political party to advance a caucus, who can advance all kinds of ideas. Who is this person? Nicknamed the Little Magician. He's from New York. Look at your notes.
You said a decline in notables and an increase in what?
In popular politics. So now more and more people can vote. So who is this guy I'm talking about? He actually becomes president in 1836 after Jackson. How did you know? Van Buren. Nice pull, A.B. So he really becomes the first real politician, first real modern day politician. And he uses political parties to advance the platform of the Democrats. He uses patronage, that spoil system, to reward party members for their loyalty. Look at your vocab. Clay's American system. That's also going to be on your test. American system. There are three major components. What are those three major components? National bank. Tariff, protective tariff, and subsidized infrastructure like canals and roads, things like that. Subsidized. In other words, the government helps pay for it. That's what a subsidy means. It offsets the cost.
So kind of like a student loan.
Absolutely.
And these are the three what?
Those are the three major components of Clay's American system. And that's why Clay goes into that corrupt bargain with John Quincy Adams in the election of 1824. Who won the popular vote of 1824? Jackson did. But was it enough to win the election? Nope, because what do you have to have? You have to have enough electoral votes. Jackson won, but he didn't win enough in the states where there were enough electoral votes. So that corrupt bargain, Jackson it puts a lot of steam in his trunk, and in 1828 he runs again, and he wins a landslide. And he rebrands the party. They are no longer called Democratic Republicans. They just now, from 1828 on, call themselves Democrats. So from 1828 on, they are called Democrats. So you don't have to worry anymore about calling them anything else. They've gone from anti-federalists to Democratic Republicans to now just Democrats. And that is the name of the party today. But in 1828, they were rather conservative. So you see, it's not the people that change, it's the parties. The reason why he calls them Democrats is because the term Democrat is much more Big Ten. It's much more open. It's much more inclusive, isn't it? Democracy. Okay? Now, Emily, every president picks and chooses their secretary, right? Secretary of War, Secretary of Treasury, etc. But Jackson also picked an informal one, and what did we call this? What kind of cabinet was that? The kitchen
That
cabinet.
was informal.
Huh?
It was informal.
An informal advisors, exactly. This kitchen cabinet he relied on for lots of political advice. Catherine, tariff. The tariffs of 28, 32. Which state found them so objectionable they called it an abomination?
Was this South Carolina?
South Carolina. Which vice president, soon to be Senator Harper, John C. Calhoun. He wrote the South Carolina Exposition of Protest. And Molly, he said that it was unconstitutional. On which precedent did he base his legal argument that South Carolina had the right to nullify the tariff? Exactly. He goes all the way back to 1796 and says the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions gave him precedent. But Bernadette, what did Jackson do? Did Jackson say, oh, okay, South Carolina, you don't have to say? He did not. In fact, what did Jackson do? South Carolina said, we're not paying this. You can't make us. What did he do? He sure did. He sent troops to Charleston, and what was it called? He forced them, and so in fact, it's called the Force Bill. That's a great way to remember it, okay? To enforce the tariff, it was called the Force Bill. And he forced South Carolina to pay it. How about that? That's a good way to do it, right? And he used military, and so nullification, completely passed. So, Mady, you had asked earlier about the function of the second bank. The Bank of the United States was basically to stabilize the nation's money. It made the state banks occasionally convert their paper money to hard money, in other words, gold and silver, so that they would not issue too many bank notes or bank credits. So that because if you issue too much paper money, what happens, Zoe?
Then it becomes worthless.
Exactly, that creates inflation, exactly. So really the national bank is a stabilizing force, okay? But we all know that Jackson could not stand the bank. He believed that it infringed upon the liberty of the people, that it had entirely too much. And he goes to veto.
He infringed what?
He what?
He infringed what?
He believed that the bank infringed upon the liberty of the people, that it had entirely too much power, and it was too much power in the hands of too few. So he vetoes this bank. Going to Jackson's Native Americans, his relationships with Native Americans. There were 5 tribes, 5 eastern tribes. Choctaw, Seminole, Chickasaw, Cherokee. What was the other one?
Do you want us to write them all down?
Maybe not to write them all down, I'm just trying to remember. Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Seminole. I can't remember the other one. Anyway, there are 5 tribes. And essentially, Jackson aims to absolutely kick them off their land and move them west of Mississippi. And he does so. The Cherokee, they dress in white man's clothes. They farm. They have a written language. They convert to Christianity. Some of them even own slaves. But that's not white enough for Jackson. And he forces them off their land. Everyone except for Native Americans. He's for farmers. Because Native Americans can't vote, so he can't really be for them, can he? Right. So, this is called the Trail of Tears. He sends them all to the Indian Reserve. This is later on called Oklahoma. If any of y'all have ever been to Oklahoma, you'd be like, oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear about that. And all that federal land, those land sales, actually, for the very first time in the United States history, there is not only no deficit, no national deficit, there actually is a surplus. The first and probably the only time, I think, ever, I don't foresee us paying down this one, ever in the nation's history. When Jackson leaves office, there's a surplus. If you wanted to buy land, what did you have to buy it with? You had to buy it with money, but what kind of money? Could you buy it with a banknote? No, you could not. What did you have to buy it with, AB?
Gold or silver?
Gold or silver. And what was the name of that act that he passed?
Species.
Species circular. Very good.
I got that one.
Yeah, there's one thing for the government to print money, but they sure weren't going to take what they were printing, right? Okay, so to wrap it all up, the politics of this nation by the 1840s really starts to see these political parties gaining a tremendous amount of strength and influence. And Americans largely enjoy it. Voter turnout is 60, 70, 80% for white men. They identify with these parties, and parties start to divide along religious and ethnic lines. And they still do today. Think about it. If you're very conservative, you're more likely to vote what? Republican, probably. If you're very liberal, you're more likely to vote Democrat. But y'all, in 1840s, if you were very conservative, guess who you voted? Democrat. So again, it's not the people who have changed. It's the parties. Because in 1854, it was Lincoln's party that freed the slaves. Okay? All right, you can stop your recording.